Rob Berger here, author of Retire Before Mom and Dad. In this video, we're going to cover chapter 11 of the book, Retire Before Mom and Dad, where we looked at financial freedom and actually trying to calculate how long it will take someone to achieve financial freedom given their income, how much they're spending, how much they're saving, and so on. This calculator will help you estimate how long it will take you to achieve financial freedom. Now, there are some really important assumptions built into this calculator, all of which you can change, but I want to show you how they work and why I've made the assumptions that I have, but more importantly, again, how you can change them to fit your specific circumstances. Now, recall from the book that I define ultimate financial freedom, what I call level 7 financial freedom, is as having 25 times your annual expenses saved. Now, if most of your savings are in traditional retirement accounts, 401ks and IRAs, I would think of this before taxes. And if most of your savings are in Roth type accounts, I would think of this in sort of after tax numbers because you can withdraw from those accounts in retirement without paying taxes. You can use this calculator either way. We're just going to assume for the sake of this video that we're looking at before tax numbers. But again, you can change it to fit your specific circumstances and use the calculator either way. So let's begin with why I define financial freedom, ultimate financial freedom, level 7 financial freedom as having 25 times your annual expenses. And it comes down to a topic I discuss in the book called the 4% rule. The idea is that when you enter retirement in year one, you can spend 4% of your investments, whatever you have. You can take out 4%, and then every year after that, take that number, whatever it was that you took out, and adjust it for inflation, and do that year after year after year, and still have a reasonable chance of surviving, if you will, in retirement, or put another way, a reasonable chance that you'll die before your money will run out, right? Now, it's not a guarantee. There's no insurance company behind this rule that says, if you fall short, we'll cover you. But based on looking at historical returns, folks have found that it is a reasonable approach to retirement. So that's what I use here. In fact, you can see the assumption is built in right here in this cell with the withdrawal rate. Now, that's a really important assumption. And if we change the assumption, the numbers that are here are going to change. And I'll show you that in just a minute. But before we do, let's look at how this number is calculated. So we're assuming a $100,000 annual income in this case, just because it's an easy number, round number. Obviously, you can put whatever you want here, whatever your income is. One thing to keep in mind, changing this number will change all of these numbers, because remember, what we do is based on your spending rate and your saving rate, we calculate what you need in your financial freedom fund. So let's just look at these numbers. So you make $100,000, you save 5% of it. That means you spend 95% or $95,000, and it just so happens that $95,000 times 25 equals this number, and we can just make sure 95,000 times 25, and there you go. We can make this $1, and it's the same number. That's all we've done. So here in this row, it's simply taking 100,000, taking 90% of it, since that's what you spend, that's 90 grand, and multiplying it by 25, you get this number, and on all the way down. So if you change this to 50,000, what you're going to see is all of these numbers will change because you're dealing with a smaller amount, but your years to financial freedom won't, because it's still based on spending rate and savings rate. So if we go to 50,000, again, these numbers changed because you're spending less and saving less, because it's all based on your annual income. But these numbers didn't change. And again, that may seem counterintuitive, but just keep in mind, because you're making less, that means you're spending less, which means the amount of your financial freedom fund is less. But you're also saving less. And it all equals out to the same years to financial freedom, again, giving the various return rate assumptions. So we'll go back to 100,000 again, just because it's a round number. And that brings us to the withdrawal rate. This will make a big difference to all of these numbers. So let's try it just so you can see. We'll put in 3.5%, and everything changed. This changed, and all of these numbers changed. And it looks like the number didn't actually change, but let's just add some decimals. There we go. And let's just make sure we understand why. Again, if we need to generate, we'll use the first row. We need to generate $95,000 a year in retirement, because we're going to assume that's what we're spending, whether, again, it doesn't matter whether it's after tax or before tax in this hypothetical. We're spending $95,000 a year. If we can only take out 3.5% in year one, as opposed to 4%, we need a larger freedom fund, right? If we remember, our original freedom fund was 2.375%. So, or excuse me, 2.375 million. If we take that number and we multiply it by 4%, we should get $95,000. There it is, right? But let's assume that we've decided we're not comfortable taking that much out in year one. We only want to take out 3.5%. Well, goodness, we've fallen short. We need 95,000, and 3.5% of this number is only 83,000. Right? Well, that means the financial freedom fund, how much we need to save, goes up. And that's where we get back to changing this number, and there it is. And it goes up, and if we were to put that number here, which we can do, whoops, let's try that again. You'll see it comes out to 95,000. Again, it might be a little counterintuitive, but I think if you work with the calculator and change the numbers, you'll see how it affects everything. The withdrawal rate is a critical assumption. Again, we use 4%, which I think is reasonable. Certainly, it's reasonable for traditional retirement, and even those, say, my age in their 50s. When you get to extreme early retirement, I would definitely want to err on the side of caution and probably lower that withdrawal rate, as I mentioned in the book. But the real key takeaway is that the withdrawal rate assumption is critical. You change it and you change all of the numbers, both how much you need to accumulate in your financial freedom fund, which then in turn changes your years to financial freedom. Now, recall in the book that when we were calculating our years to financial freedom, I assumed not 9.3%, which I had assumed earlier when we looked at the money multiplier, but I wanted to adjust that for inflation. So I took, again, historical data dating back to 1926, and the inflation rate in the United States has been just under 3% on average, 2.91 as I recall. I just rounded it up to 3, and so for purposes of the calculations in the book, I assumed a 6.3% rate of return. Well, you can change that here. We can make this 6.3, and it will change the numbers. Again, it doesn't look like it changed, but let's just add the decimals. There it is. And you can see the differences here. And you can just look at your savings rate. So if you're able to save 20%, again, assuming a after inflation rate of return of 6.3%, it'll take you about 31 years to retire. So someone out of college would either retire or achieve sort of level 7 financial freedom in their early 50s. Now, one thing I want to caution is that life is never this neat and simple, right? I've yet to meet someone who started off right out of college saving a certain amount of money or even a certain percentage of their income, and that just staying constant for 10, 20, 30 years. Life is just not that neat and orderly, right? You may be saving less because you're paying down school loans, or for a year or two you decide to focus on buying a home, and so you're saving less for your freedom, but more for the home. And those are perfectly valid decisions. On the other hand, maybe one year you have a good year at work and you get a big bonus that was unexpected, and you decide to save it, and so that year you're saving more, right? So this doesn't work in lockstep in reality, right? But this calculator, assuming you put in reasonable assumptions, can at least give you a guideline, if you will, or a rough estimate. And of course, as the months and years go by, you can begin to refine this, right? So if we move forward 10 years, you might have, we'll just assume, 300,000 in savings. And that, of course, changes all of these numbers. And by then, maybe your annual income has gone up, and I'm just going to assume 125,000. That doesn't change these numbers, but it does change these numbers. But hopefully, as your income has gone up, your savings rate has gone up. So maybe you started at 5%, but now you're at 15%. And perhaps you're hoping to get to 20 or 25%. Again, the point is that things change over time, and our ability to save changes over time. But you can use this spreadsheet to make those adjustments and see the resulting numbers. And if you think, maybe you think 6.3% is too low or too high, you can make that change for yourself. Again, the spreadsheet starts off with just rates of 5 to 9%. But if you change any one of these, let's just change this to 4%, it changes the numbers in that column. And that's how I intended to make this calculator, really so that you could use your own assumptions rather than having to be stuck with the assumptions that I make. Now, I do have another section of the calculator down here that allows you to make one really important change. Here, you're sort of forced to assume that if you're saving 5%, you're spending 95%, or if you're saving 25%, you're spending 75%. But as you look to the future, you may conclude that your spending in retirement won't actually consume, say, in this case, 75% of your current income, and let's just put it back to $100,000. You may say, no, Rob, in retirement, I actually think I can reduce that spending, maybe because by then you'll have your home paid off. And by then the kids will have been, have left the home and maybe gotten through college. And so you don't have the expenses of raising children and saving for a college education. Of course, there could be circumstances where you think your expenses in some ways might go up. Maybe you plan to travel the world, or maybe there are health issues and you want to factor in the cost of health spending. So the point of all that is down here, you can just put in, rather than as a percentage of your income, the actual amount that you're saving and what you think you'll spend in retirement. And then, of course, you can set the withdrawal rate and your return assumption. I would never go with 10%, but let's go back to 3%. And you can put your current savings in, and it will give you an estimate of your years to financial freedom. And I find this to be really useful, particularly as you're further in on your journey and you have a better view of what retirement is going to look like. In your 20s and 30s, at least if you're like I was then, I didn't have a clue what retirement might look like. I was just saving money, right, and trying to invest it as best I could. But as you get closer and closer to retirement, you have a sense probably of where you might live in retirement. Maybe it's where you live now. Maybe it's not. You kind of have a sense as to what's going to happen with the children. Although, as a father, I can tell you it's pretty unpredictable, but you at least have a better sense. Well, you can use this section of the calculator to maybe fine-tune the assumptions and not be reliant on this relationship between the spending rate and the savings rate. I hope this video has helped you understand the calculator. I encourage you to make a copy of it, and then you can change all of the numbers in any way you'd like. And of course, please leave comments down below the video and with questions or comments, whatever you have, and I will do my best to respond to them quickly. And of course, below the video, I'll also leave a link where you can grab this calculator and make a copy for yourself. In the next video, and there are 2 more videos left, one relating to chapter 22 of the book, the other chapter 24. They deal with investing. In chapter 22, I'm going to kind of walk through target date retirement funds and what I call the 3-fund portfolio. And then in chapter 24 video, we're going to look at how to use Morningstar to evaluate any mutual fund, including ones you might have in your 401k.